Here we go. This is animal head part 4. So this is the next steps to actually building your head. Okay. So I've got my newspaper armature, which means that's something I'm going to wrap my clay around. I'm going to take my smaller slab and just put it on the bottom. Now this slab is probably way bigger than I need, but you know what? I would rather start with a larger slab for my demonstration. So I'm just going to cut off the extra right away. So I have a smaller slab now. Okay. This is going to be the piece I'm going to lay it on top of. Okay, I'm going to save this for right now, but if I don't use it, I'm going to immediately get it back and moisten it and slap it back on that big block for somebody else. Now, here comes my big slab. By the way, I don't lay my slab directly on the table because if I do, I'm going to have a big mess issue. So now what I'm going to do is just kind of wrap the slab around here. Push it down around the top of this. Okay, so I've got my little basic shape here. Now, obviously, I got a lot of extra clay, so I'm just going to take a knife and cut this excess clay off and either give it to somebody immediately or walk over to the slab roller, slap this all into a big slab, get it a little bit wet, and we can use it right away. So I already got the basis now. So I'm going to do is I'm going to down here, I'm going to really push it into that slab with my fingers. Okay, you know what I forgot to do? I should have done? I should have put a piece of newspaper underneath this. That was a huge mistake because it's going to be hard to get my slab off. So I'm going to do that. So once again, put a new piece of newspaper there. I got a little scrap over here. I'm going to grab right away here. And from now on, I'm going to have this on that newspaper at all times. So here's the bottom of my slab. I'm going to fold some of that clay over. So I'm enclosing this newspaper into a big slab of clay. Okay? Now later, you can cut a hole in the bottom and you're going to be removing the newspaper when this thing gets leather hard. So here's the beginning of my clay. Now, the nice thing is the clay, I can move it around and the newspaper gives it some support. At the same time, it has enough give in it that I can kind of really shape this thing. So if you remember my rhino, he's got kind of a sloped face. So I'm going to slope that a little bit. I'm going to give him a little bit of a chin here. I'm always going to get rid of any of these little lines here. So once in a while, I take my water, and I'm just going to put a little water on there and then take a dry finger and kind of smooth off those cracks and crevices that you see there. Okay? Now, forming in this more of a head, I'm going to give it sort of an eye socket area. So I'm just smoothing the clay. My thumbs are a little bit moist, smoothing that clay. So I'm giving it sort of an eye socket area. Obviously, if I wanted to build up his brows a little bit more, what I could do would take a piece of clay like this. Okay, just going to move some things out of the way here. I'll take a piece of clay like this. I'll take it on my table. And all I'm going to do now is kind of form this into a little clay cigarette or cigar sort of thing by rolling it back and forth on here until I get a little bit of a roll. I'm doing this super fast, by the way, just because for demonstration purposes, I don't want to bore the heck out of you. So I'm going to go like this, and there we go. That would be a nice area that you could add as a brow. Now, everything I add, I'm going to take my toothbrush, remember, and I'm going to score it and get it a little bit wet. So underneath here, I'm going to score this, score this, get this wet, squish it in place. But for demonstration purposes, I'm not doing that right now, just because I want to speed things up. So I'm going to do that. So I've got my brow area sort of built up. You can kind of see the way this is sort of looking here. Maybe I push this in where his nostrils are going in. Now I want to really make those nostrils look three-dimensional. So once again, I'm going to take my clay. I'm going to roll myself this little clay cigarette or little stick here. I'm going to roll this into a little skinny little roll like that. I'll probably put one right up here. I'll put one right there. Can you see this up close? So I've done that like that. Then what I'm going to do is take my wood modeling tool. I'm going to get it a little bit wet, and I'm going to smooth the top of this in here like so. So I'll smooth the top in there like that. So really I got the beginning of that, okay? Next thing, I'm just going to show you how to make some eyes. I got a way that I make eyes, and what I'll do is I'll take a piece of clay like this, okay, and I'm just going to roll it into a little ball. So I get this little tiny ball, okay? Let's zoom in here. I'm going to take that ball, and I'm going to cut that ball in half. The The reason I'm cutting it in half is because I want two sort of half domes for the eyes. So I cut it right in half. And now we got these two sort of little half domes there. Okay, and they should be about the same size. Mine are a little bit off, but you get the idea. Okay, I'm going to flatten those out a little bit. Okay, and what I'm going to do to make that eye, remember, I want to make that eye look really three-dimensional. So I'm going to take something round like the end of a pencil or a pen. Okay, and what I'm going to do here, you could see I'm going to push this down into the clay. That'll give it its dark pupil look. That there's a shadow in there. Okay, now I'm just going to show you one eye. I'll put this up here. There's the eye. So once again, I would score that, but for demonstration, I'm not going to do it. There's my eye like that. Okay, now I'm going to take my little clay again. I'm going to roll that into a little clay cigar again, or a little clay cigarette, little worm. And I'm going to lay that over the top of the eye so it looks kind of like an eyelid. Okay, and then I'm going to take my wood modeling tool and smooth this into there so it doesn't just look like a worm sitting above his eye. So the one side I smooth into there. Now it looks like he's got like a little eyelid wrapped around his eye there. See that? And I would do the same with his lips. So for the lips, let's say you were going to make an animal here and you wanted to give it teeth, okay? You could do something like this. You could first, just kind of engrave your little teeth in here. So I'm just going to engrave my teeth, okay? And put lines like this, sort of like that. Then, I'm going to take my clay, once again, my little clay worms, and I'm going to make an upper lip. So if I put an upper lip right here, and I put a lower lip below that, okay, I would score that, of course. Now, I'm not crazy about this for demonstration. I'm going to do that. And then what I'm going to do is take this again, and I'm going to take the top edge and sort of smooth it into the skin so it looks like the lips are sort of rising out of the skin as opposed to two little worms stuck on top of your clay. So I do that. On the bottom edge here, same thing. I'm going to do it right here. Got the idea? So I'm getting the idea of a little mouth and eyes. For ears, this is what I would do for ears. Depends on the kind of ear you're going to make. But let's say I make a little ear that's like a little flap, sort of like a human ear, or like a dog ear. So I'd probably take that clay, okay, kind of flatten it out like this. I'm going to take my rolling pin and kind of roll it out. So with that rolling pin, I can make a slab. So it's really what your slab roller's doing. I've got this thing like an ear. Well, obviously, this is only one of them. But if I wanted to make two, obviously cut two out. So let's say it was like a little flap like a dog's ear. So let's say that I wanted to make it, I'm going to cut it a little bit more like this, so it's a little bit skinnerier on the top. So there's my ear, okay? Now, if I was just to connect this ear here and just connect it like this, it is going to break off, okay? It's just going to break off. There's no way it's going to stand up. It's like putting snow arms on a snowman. They're not going to stay, okay? So what I'd want to do is if I curl this a little bit, that's going to make it a little bit stronger if it's curled. Okay, and also I'd probably want to make sure that this is kind of a little stout, a little shorter. So I'm going to cut that off a little bit. Now I would, do something like that. Now and then I'd smooth this in. But you know what? I still think this ear is going to break off. No matter how secure I make that ear is only connected by a tiny little slab. So what I'm going to do here is in back, I'm going to reinforce it. So in back, I'm going to take another slab. And I'm either going to build this up here so it's very thick in the back. That's going to make it a lot sturdier. Now, maybe not the animal in real life wouldn't have this big, area of fat flesh back here holding that in place, but I'm going to do it on mine so that you can see that ear is more sturdy, okay? So once again, that's how my ear looks. Now, if I wanted a longer ears like, let's say, a beagle or a basset hound, and those ears were flopping down, what I would do is I would make sure that they not only flop down, but that they touch part of the body, and then I would connect that part of the body, okay? This still is pretty thin. And when you have, this starts to get dry, you better watch out, because if you bump that ear, it's going to crack right off, okay? So super careful if you're going to do something like this. Okay, let's go with a horn once. I'm going to take a horn. I'm going to roll myself a little horn. I'm going to do this in my hands again. Let's bring this out. So once again, here's a horn. Long, skinny horn, probably not going to work. Short, fat horn, yeah, that would probably be fine. So I'm going to make a short, fat horn. This one's a little fatter than, shorter than I want, but I'm going to go cut that in half. So I'm just going to take it, make it a little shorter. There's my horn. So let's say I connect that to the head. I'll score that and connect that, okay? Now to make it really look like it's coming out of the head, here we go with my little skinny clay worm again. I'd probably wrap that around the horn like so, okay? Then I'd probably, once again, take my wood modeling tool, get it a little bit wet, okay? And then I'd smooth this part into the head. So it looks like it's kind of, that horn is emerging from his head rather than it's just like stuck on there like Mr. Potato Head, okay? Next, textures. Lots of ways to make textures. So I want your textures to be really three-dimensional. So I'm just gonna practice with a couple textures on the back here. For example, let's say I wanted to make, I could take something like this, and maybe I'm gonna just indent some real deep grooves into that clay. Okay? Just really indent that into the clay to create a pretty heavy texture. Okay? Let's say I wanted to make something that looks more like fish scales. I might take something rounded, like let's say the edge of my toothbrush here. And maybe I take the edge of that toothbrush and I just kind of push dimples into it, right next to each other, all over the place. See what I'm doing here? So I'm pushing these little dimples in, and I'm getting this really rocky, dimply-like surface. It's pretty easy to do. Just look around for just everyday items that are in the room that you could possibly do this with. I'm gonna get one more item. Okay, here we go. Just a little popsicle stick. Look at this thing. If I do this, so let's say I want to make a texture. I take this half round shape like that. See that? And then another one. And then another one. Okay? And another one. Then in between, I do another row of them. Here, 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 and then another row. Here, 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 here. It really starts to look sort of like fish scales. So what you're going to do is your project, as I said before, has to really have a huge majority of it with texture on it. You can see this rhino here, he's got a lot of texture on him, and all that texture is catching the light, so it looks very three-dimensional. You can see this one has more of that dimpled skin on it, okay? So some kind of texture. And last, of course, this is just the beginning of my project. As this gets harder, I'll start carving areas and really refining it. And when you do that, probably want to set it up on your basket. Remember that? So I'd maybe take my basket, put it up here, put my project up on the basket, just like that, so I can work on a little bit elevated there. And then last thing, storing it. So when you go to store your project, okay, once again, if I want this to remain exactly how it is, then you're going to take damp paper towels. These paper towels I already got wet. I wrung them out so they're damp, and I'm going to wrap my project with the damp paper towels, okay? Sometimes kids will actually take the little clay mister. It's the bottle that doesn't have blue in it. If it's got blue in it like that bottle, that's cleaner. Over there by the clay, over in this area, there's a mister bottle over there, okay? So I wrap that up. I put a bag tightly around this, and it should be good to go next class, okay? But if I want it to get stiffer, then what I might want to do is this. These ears, I'm always worried about these ears sticking out. So sometimes I might individually wrap these ears just to keep them a little bit moist because they might dry out too quick. But anyhow, I'm going to take my bag now this time because I want this, let's say I had everything done on it and I want it to get a little stiffer. Then I'm going to wrap this tight in a bag, put the bag tightly around it, okay? And then if you have to tuck something in here so no air gets in the side. And then what I will do is next class, it'll be stiffer. And I can start to carve it. Okay, of course, always be careful of something like that ear breaking off. Okay? And then finally, when this thing is leather hard, we're going to be flipping it over, okay? We're going to be cutting out a lid just like you would a pumpkin. So I'm going to cut out a lid like a pumpkin lid, do this kind of a thing, and remove that lid. Now, I'll have two students will hold this at one time, or one student will hold it very securely. Then you're going to take an X-Acto knife and you're going to start slicing up this paper here, and then just pulling it out in little shreds. Okay, now you won't do that till this clay is stiff. Right now it's way too soft. Okay, and that's about it. So there you go. Let's say I wanted to make a tongue on this guy. You know, I'd roll out a clay slab like this. Of course, this is too thick, but I might have that tongue coming out of here. But I'd make sure that it touches to that or rests on the table so it doesn't break off. That's your animal head.